Greetings, brothers and sisters in Christ, and welcome to Genesis chapter 7. We'll be picking up in verse 17. We will not make chapter 8, verse 19, but we will get into chapter 8. This is the Global Cataclysm, part number 2. This is lesson 15 in our series. We had a problem with the video that was recorded in class, so I'm just going to do this one old school. I just sat down and I'll run through my notes here at my desk and then get them up on the webpage for those who missed the lesson. So in class, we actually started with a pop quiz. So I'll give you the pop quiz. What is the longest mountain range on planet Earth? We had a number of guesses in the class. I'll give you a few more seconds to process that. The Himalayas was a guess that came out of the class, as well as the Andes. Both of those are wrong. The Andes, which is the second longest, is actually only about a tenth of the longest mountain range on the planet. You see, the longest mountain range on the planet is a mountain range we refer to as the mid-oceanic ridge. It is a 40,390 long mountain chain that wraps around our planet like the seam on a baseball. On average, it rises 6,600 feet above the ocean floor. It is an underwater mountain range. Now, we are told that this underwater mountain range, the mid-oceanic ridge, is the source of plate tectonics here on planet Earth, and that this ridge slowly moves the continents across the mantle, much like a conveyor belt might move products around a plant. We are told it moves the seafloor and the continents at roughly 2 centimeters to 5 centimeters a year. So that's less than an inch to 2 inches a year. We're talking very small. Now, this is absolutely impossible for a number of reasons. I'll just provide you with a couple. First, the mantle is solid. The mantle is not molten, it's not liquid, it's not silly putty. There are no physics or math calculation that you can bring forward that will allow a mountain to push up 6,000 feet, and while it's simultaneously pushing ocean floor and continents around the face of the planet across the mantle. If you attempted to do this, the rock would just simply crunch and crush. And equally, what happens while all this is going on with this ridge pushing, obviously, to the west, this ridge pushing this way to the east? Which way is South America going? And why aren't there mountain ranges on both sides of the planet? Because it's getting squished like this. You see, this is simply impossible. This was easy to believe when we knew very little and we didn't understand the mid-oceanic ridge. It was not until the 50s that we even knew it existed. But this was easy to understand years ago, not so easy now. But let me give you the rest of the story. So the plot thickens, and a little pun intended there, that'll play out soon enough. Further, we're told that this was once a supercontinent called Pangaea, and that the mid-oceanic ridge broke Pangaea apart and into the continents in the configuration that we see today. In high school or college, we were likely taught, or you were likely taught, that Alfred Wegener's concept of Pangaea was really answers the mail to why the continents look like they do today. Now, this theory was first introduced in 1912. That was decades before we knew anything about the mid-oceanic ridge. This theory made sense because the continents appear to fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. So this all works great, this whole Pangaea thing, as long as we do not ask too many questions. Like, what happened to half of Mexico? What happened to Central America? What force rotated America left counterclockwise from its orientation today, while at the same time rotated South America clockwise from the position we see today? Oh, and what happened with Africa? It shrunk by 35% in Wegener's drawing. Africa is 35% larger. Once we position Europe and Africa on a 3D globe and include the continental shelf, it does not fit together at all like we have been told. In fact, there's massive gaps in how it fits together. However, so that I do not bury the lead, if we move the continents to the edge of the mid-oceanic ridge from which they slid, and we'll talk about that soon enough, all of a sudden, this puzzle not only fits together, but makes sense and points us to the reality of Noah's flood. So considering the idea of the mid-oceanic ridge and it pressing out from its center axis across the ocean floor and pushing continents around, much like you might push a paper around. Again, I would ask the question, which way is South America moving? The ridge is closer to the east coast of South America, but all the mountain ranges are on the west coast of South America. Equally, as you think about the supposed seafloor spreading, okay, so that would be spreading sort of north and south. We get it. Well, what about the intersection point? Wouldn't that be all pressing west? Why is it not crumpling up material on both sides? Obviously, this is not what is happening. It can't be happening. There would be material crumpled up around that intersection with all of those axes pointing materials and pushing materials at each other. And that's in the Indian Ocean. We can look down in the Atlantic Ocean. We have the same phenomena. Why is it not pushing up mountains of material? This is not seafloor spreading. That is not what is happening here. This simply cannot happen. This is impossible. It was plausible when we knew nothing about the mid-oceanic ridge. It was plausible when we just drew rough sketches of the continents on flat paper and shrunk Africa by 35% and smashed them all together and said, look, it fits. But when we put these on a 3D globe, they don't fit at all, especially when we add the continental shelf. But when we bring them against the mid-oceanic ridge from which they slid, all of a sudden they fit like a glove. So last week we went back to Creation Week and reviewed days 2 and 3 of the creation account. And I'll not do that again, but I will touch upon some things to get us started. We considered the possibility of an ice canopy or water vapor. And again, that would have possibly been part of the initial creation. And I told you if it was there, it was less than 40 feet thick. We then moved on to day 3 of creation and discussed the possibility of God creating subterranean water chambers. That's water under the crust. That's water that's in like interconnected caverns under the crust. So we talked about those subterranean water chambers and that they would have initially contained approximately half of the water we see on the surface of our planet. We reviewed multiple verses that seem to state something like that in the Bible. So not only did we see that hint in the creation story, but Psalm 24 tells us that God founded the earth on the seas. Its foundation was on the sea. Psalm 33 tells us that God put the deep in storehouses. So he put the ocean deep in storehouses. And Psalm 136 tells us that God spread the earth above the waters. So again, was there a thin canopy? Possibly. Had to be less than 40 feet of water or the equivalent. Again, we said the crust would have been 10 to 60 miles thick, so this is not drawn to scale. This was just a picture I could find on the internet to get you to see it. The crust would be essentially between 10 and 60 times thicker than the water layer. So this would be a massive amount of granite crust laying on a top of a 3/4 to 1 mile chamber of water. And to summarize all my thoughts, I said, quote, there is a possibility there was a water vapor, ice canopy initially when God created this planet, and a very high probability that there were subterranean water chambers as part of that initial creation. And those chambers would provide the bulk of the water that God used to flood the earth during the global catastrophe in Noah's days. We then moved on to look at the catastrophe. To attempt to understand the magnitude of the catastrophe, we begin to see how God was carefully recording the timeline of the catastrophe and providing us with very detailed day-to-day accounts connected to Noah's life from the moment the global deluge began. We ended last week being reminded that God was in control, that he is the one who brought the animals to Noah, and that he is the one who shut the door on the ark. We discussed how God protected the ark through this massive calamity, catastrophe, and not a single person or animal was lost. So to get us back in context, it was in the 600th year of Noah's life. In the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of heavens were opened, and rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Now last week, I said for a moment I'm going to ask you to use your sanctified imagination. I'm going to ask you to take that sanctified imagination informed by the scriptures, and we're going to weave science into it and possibly attempt to grasp the magnitude of the catastrophe. And so I want us to do that one more time, except to advance the argument just a little further. So the pre-flood Earth likely had one supercontinent, again with smaller oceans than what we see today. There was likely an interconnected water chamber. The estimate for these subterranean water caverns, again, 3/4 of a mile to a mile thick. Now you think, well, that's not much water. Well, it's actually a water column that's 4,000 to 5,300 feet thick. It's a massive water column. And again, it would have had on top of it 10 to 60 miles of crust. So imagine in your mind this large supercontinent, smaller oceans, massive and lush vegetation, and again, these subterranean water chambers, 4,000 to 5,300 feet thick, under the immense pressure of the overlying granite rock. Modeling tells us that over time, due to the tidal effects of the moon, energy would have slowly been building up in the subterranean water chambers due to the pumping effect of the moon. Just like the tides, it would be to a lesser effect, but there would be pumping as the moon interacted with our planet. Failure in the crust would have possibly begun as a microscopic crack that was either initiated due to pressure in those subterranean water chambers exceeding the shear strength of the overlying crust, or for some reason initiated by God. This fracture formed in the subterranean caverns and traveled up through the crust to the surface. That fracture would have cut through the rock, and then once arriving at the surface, the tear would begin to travel, to propagate in both directions, finding the path of least resistance and traveling around the globe at the speed of sound in granite, which is about 2 miles a second. It would have traveled around the globe in less than 3 hours. The estimated power release on the face of this planet would have exceeded every nuclear explosion and every nuclear test ever conducted combined by a massive factor. The tear, initially small, would have allowed water under massive pressure to begin to escape uncontrollably. It would be shearing pebbles and rocks as it raced up the tear, and the crust would begin pulsing and ejecting further pebbles and rocks along with the water under tremendous pressure. Due to the pressure of the overbearing rock, due to gravity, this water, along with dirt, pebbles, and rocks, would have been ejected violently into our atmosphere and even beyond our atmosphere. The spray from these enormous fountains produced torrential rains such as the earth has never experienced before or since. If you would have been standing on the surface of our planet, you would have beheld a catastrophe of epic proportions, accompanied with torrential rain. As you move closer and closer to the rip, the tear, the volume of mud, pebbles, and rocks raining back down would have increased. This was the event that caused the majority of fossils we find on our planet today. This was the event that resulted in the creation of coal, oil, and methane reserves we find on our planet today. This is the event, rapid, catastrophic plate tectonics, that have created the surface of our planet as we see it today. And the catastrophic plate tectonics would have been accompanied shortly thereafter by massive volcanic activity, particularly in the Pacific. The atmospheric turbulence would have been unmatched prior to that day and since, as the bursting of the fountains of the great deep would have destroyed any type of water vapor, ice canopy that existed at the time, and would have created heavy atmospheric disturbances. Again, as I stated, and that picture sums it up, the spray from these enormous fountains produced torrential rain that have never been observed on our planet. This would have been a catastrophe, unlike anything you and I have ever imagined, even in our wildest nightmares. With water jetting into and above our atmosphere, rain, dirt, pebbles, and rock are raining back down on the planet, and in the upper latitudes, it is even producing ice and snow. As this water under massive pressure and superheated from years of tidal pumping exited the small slit, it would have been shearing pebbles, rocks, and small boulders and ejecting them through that slit. It would have been depositing mud, silt, and pebbles and rocks along the face of this planet, which together are rapidly burying many plants and animals, both land and sea animals. If the slit passed through one of the early oceans, you can imagine the contents of that ocean being blasted into the atmosphere from water beneath, from the fountains of the great deep. As this continues on, you can imagine, as the picture portrays, the slit getting wider and wider and wider as water continues to be ejected. As the slit continued to slowly grow, the crust is flexing ever so slightly, deflecting. It's fluttering, similar, although not nearly as much, as a flag flutters in high wind. The flexing and fluttering is tearing materials away from the roof of the chamber, and those materials are being ejected out the slit. As the crust crashes into the mantle at different places, materials are being swept into the flow that is being moved toward the slit. As the crust flexes, it temporarily closes off the flow, builds up pressure, creates massive cavitation in a water hammer, all of that flexing and fluttering. Now, it might be hard for us to imagine the crust flexing and bending, but please keep in mind, we're looking at a very large thing on a very small scale here on the computer screen. The crust we're talking about that was flexing was 2,500 miles across. Even a small amount of flutter in massive distances like that creates a large flutter at the nozzle. So even if granite were only sagging 1 inch per mile, that would be 2,500 inches at the funnel, at the nozzle. That would have been over 200 feet in movement of flutter at the nozzle. This would have been catastrophic. As the slit widened, exposing more and more of the underlying mantle, with so much surface weight removed over such a wide band, the compressed rock beneath the runaway plates popped up, exposing the floor. It sprung up, and it's likely that it did this over, almost like we talked about the slit opening. This catastrophic event would have caused the granite continental plates, with still water beneath them, to slide away from the rising rift. This is the birth of the mid-oceanic ridge. This is the scar in the Earth's mantle that runs around the globe like a seam on a baseball. This resulted when the mid-oceanic ridge sprung up in catastrophic plate tectonics, the ridge rising miles above the seafloor, and the plate slid away and accelerated probably to 40 or 50 miles per hour. With these massive plates sliding away from the mid-oceanic ridge, and you can see it in the picture, what we might imagine happen is going to happen. These plates are sliding, water underneath them. They encounter resistances, they encounter rock, they begin to brush against the mantle. As the leading edges encounter these resistances and brush and rub against the mantle, these massive plates that are sliding, the speed starts decreasing. The leading edge buckles and grinds to a halt, thrusting up in a very short order of time mountains. The rock continues to compress, thickening the continents and forming the continents in their current location that we see them today. The planet will be unstable for the next year as mountains settle into the mantle. Slowly surrounding land next to those mountains that are settling is lifted. Equally, we will see God steps in to dry out the earth. You see, this is the genesis of the mid-oceanic ridge. This is the genesis of our massive ocean basins. This explains continental shelves and continental slope. This explains where all the sedimentary rock layers across the face of this planet, where they came from and when they were laid down. The flood in Noah's day explains so many things on our planet that are absolutely mysteries without it. This event, Noah's flood, is unlike anything the earth has ever experienced before or since. You see, this explains why massive mountain ranges are generally parallel from the ridge that they slid. This explains why North America has that massive wider mountain range than South America. This explains many, many puzzling facts about our planet. But let's get back to our verses. We had read 11 and 12. We'll pick up in verse 13 to get us in context, and then we're going to keep going. On the very same day, that's the very same day that the fountains of the great deep were broken up, the windows of heaven were open, and rain began to fall for 40 days and 40 nights. On that very same day, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them entered the ark. They and every beast according to its kind, and all the livestock according to their kind, and every bird, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, every winged creature. They went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2 of all flesh, in which there was the breath of life. And those that entered, forgive me for that, and those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. And that's where we ended last week, and so that's where we pick up now today. Verse 17, the flood continued 40 days on the earth. The waters increased and bore up the ark, and it rose high above the earth. So it rained for an additional 40 days and 40 nights. We're clearly told that. Now we're given additional information about this. I would remind you that the word flood being used here is mabul. It means a catastrophe. It's never used to describe anything other than a global catastrophe flood. It's never used to define when a river goes over a bank. Hebrew has a totally different word for that. This is a catastrophic flood. Now we are told that during this time the fountains of the great deep were broken open, the windows of heaven were open, it was raining, and the waters increased. You can see that the waters increased in the middle of verse 17. That's rabah. It means to increase. It means to grow. It means to multiply. It means to get bigger. They increased. So the waters are increasing here on the earth, and we see that the ark, the waters increased, and they bore up the ark. They lifted up the ark. Now, as you consider this, the ark likely drafted at least 25.5 feet. And so when the ark came off the ground, that's an indication that water level at the planet was at 25 feet above the level that they built that ark. Wherever they had the ark, whatever driveway that ark was being built in, the water level had reached approximately 25 feet, and the ark was lifted off the ground. But then the writer goes on to tell us, and it rose high above the earth. So it's not just floating, it's increasing. The water's increasing, and it's getting higher above the earth. Verse 18, the waters prevailed and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the face of the waters, as we might imagine. Here we're introduced to another new Hebrew word that I believe is worthy of a brief explanation as we think about this event. So we're told the waters were increasing. We talked about that word, rabah. Here it is again. They increased greatly. But we're told before that the waters prevailed. That's the Hebrew word gabar. Now, prevail has nothing to do with increasing greatly or level. It's the idea of the waters were mighty on the earth. The waters were strong on the earth. The waters were powerful on the earth. So when you hear me say gabar, don't think of water level. Think of they are mighty on the earth. And it seems like what the writer of Genesis is going to do is he's going to use this word gabar. The moment the ark started floating, he's going to say the waters are now gabar over the earth. And they're going to remain gabar until the ark comes to rest at day 150 on the mountains of Ararat. At that point, the waters will no longer be rabah. They'll no longer be powerful. Or excuse me, they'll no longer be gabar. They'll no longer be powerful. I stated the wrong word. The increasing is rabah. They'll no longer be powerful. And so keep that in mind, because the water level is going to go up, and it's going to rise at least to day 40, and we'll see that. It's going to get 15 cubits above the highest mountains. We'll see that. But then it's going to start decreasing to day 150 where the ark finally lands. Keep in mind, it went up and came down the entire time, as you'll see that it was gabar, that it was mighty, that it was strong. So I want you to see that now and read those ideas into these words so this makes sense. So the waters prevailed. They were gabar, they were mighty, and they increased rabah greatly on the earth, and the ark floated. And fair enough, we've got it. Verse 19, and the waters prevailed. There is again gabar. That's that mighty word. They're mighty on the earth. They're strong on the earth. It's not about level. It's about if the ark's on the ground, the waters are not Gabar. The moment the ark is not on the ground, the waters are Gabar. So the waters prevailed so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. Now, when we read that, it's pretty straightforward. This should remove any possibility of this being a local flood. But the Hebrew word itself already did that for us. This is just reinforcing the point. But if this doesn't reinforce it, the next verse has to. Verse 20. The waters prevailed. There it is again. This is the third use of the word Gabar. The waters were mighty. They prevailed above the mountains, covering them 15 cubits deep. So the waters are mighty on the planet. And in fact, the waters have covered the planet by 15 cubits. Using the long cubit, the same cubit we built the ark with, that would be 25.5 feet of water above the mountains. Now, it's important as you think about this, the ark's going to land on the mountains before water's visible because of the huge draft. So when the ark lands in the mountains of Ararat, the water level at that mountain, wherever it landed, was still roughly 25 feet, and the ark, came to rest there. Oh, sorry about that. Now, as you think about this, the waters being 15 cubits above the mountains, there's no way this is a local flood. This type of display is impossible. And let's be honest, there's no reason to build an ark if the animals just need to simply migrate over a mountain. There's no need to labor for decades and all the expense to put 8 people on an ark with a bunch of animals if they just need to migrate over the mountain. You see, the global flood was a reality that covered the globe that happened in time, and science even tells us that. There's so many evidences on our planet. Verse 21, and all flesh died that moved on the earth, birds, livestock, beasts, all the swarming creatures that swarm on the earth, and all mankind. Notice all flesh that moved on the earth died, and all mankind, Adam, died. All mankind and all the animals, everything that breathed through its nostrils died. There's no way this is a local flood. This is a global catastrophe. Now, just a point of application, as horrifying as verse 21 is, and it is very horrifying, imagine what it will be like as a man or a woman to stand before God having rejected the Messiah, having rejected his offer of salvation. That will be even more horrifying. Verse 22, everything on dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life, the Ruach, died. If it lived on the earth and it breathed through its nostrils, it perished. That's the clear language of the Hebrew and the English. Verse 23, he, that's Yahweh, that's God, blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heaven. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those who were with him in the ark. Here again we see this repetition. He blotted out, he destroyed them. He blotted out, he destroyed them. He blotted out Adam. He blotted out man. He blotted out the animals. Everything that breathed through his nostrils, that had the breath of life, that lived on this planet, died. This is not a local flood. This is a catastrophe of epic proportions. It's shocking. And it reminds us of God's hatred for sin. As we saw God's patience in Methuselah's long life, remember I told you his name means when he dies, it comes. And the fact that he lived longer than any man in the history of this planet proves our God is very patient. But we see ultimately the warnings end. Ultimately the pleadings end. Ultimately the sermons end and judgment falls. And only Noah was left and those who were with him in the ark. Now when we read this, of course it's true. God had created a rescue plan. Noah had preached on the rescue plan. God had executed the rescue plan. And God had rescued. God's rescue plan required them to be in the ark. To be in the ark means they had to respond by faith to what Noah was preaching. Noah preached the rescue plan. The ark was the rescue plan. As promised, God delivered from the catastrophe, from temporal judgment, from the global flood. But this will happen again. And only those who've responded to God's rescue plan by faith will be saved. Those who have not responded to God's rescue plan will perish. Verse 24. And the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. Now we need to pause here for just a moment and discuss that word again. That's the word gabar. This is the fourth go-round of this word. We saw it in verse 18. We saw it in verse 19. We saw it in verse 20. Now it comes back around in verse 24. The waters were mighty for 150 days. Okay, so they were mighty for this entire time. From the time that the ark rose up, they started to be gabar, however quick that happened, all the way until the ark came to rest. And we'll see that in a moment. You don't see it yet, but you will. On the 150-day journey, the 600-year, 7th month, 17th day of the month. So when you hear prevailing, don't think of increasing like some scholars have said. That's not what it means. It means they have power over, because the waters probably topped out somewhere in the 40 to 60 day range. Then they've been decreasing since, although the entire time they were gabar. And so it's understanding that word and what it means that helps us really put all this together. And that moves us into chapter 8. But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters subsided. Now again, we see the anthropomorphic language. God didn't forget Noah. It's not like God said, hey, what happened to Noah? He didn't remember him in that sense. This is a Hebraism. It's a Hebrew idiom. It's an expression. It provides an idea that not God heard in the sense of mechanically heard, but that God is taking action. It is a similar idea when we pray, God, hear my prayer. Now, we're not praying for God to hear us. We know he hears us. We're praying for God to take action on our behalf, to step in. And again, God always steps in, and sometimes that stepping in is, no, I'm not doing anything right now. But here, God is stepping in to start reversing the effects of the flood. So God remembers Noah in that sense and all the beasts that are with him. And God makes a wind blow over the earth, and the waters subside. Now, that's a different word. That's the waters are decreasing. So we don't know exactly what day he started this blowing effect and the decreasing water, but it was probably after 40 and probably not more than 60, because by 150, the ark's going to land. But again, I just need you to understand this. So somewhere between day 40 and day 110, so somewhere between right here and then 110 days later, day 150, the ark lands here. Oh, excuse me, day 150, the ark lands here. So probably early in the first 20 days or so, after the 40 days, during this 120-day period, is when the waters start to subside. They start to decrease. They start to go down. Verse 2 and 3. The fountains of the great deep and the windows of the heavens were closed. The rain from the heavens was restrained, and the waters receded from the earth continually. At the end of 150 days, the waters had abated. Okay, so pretty quick till we get to the back half of verse 3. The fountains of the great deep are closed. The windows of heaven are closed. The rain is restrained. It had rain for 40 days and 40 nights, and then it stops. Now we know more than likely the raining of 40 days, the source of that was the fountain of the great deep. Now, it could have continued on after the rain stopped falling with just the water pressure. The water on top had gotten so thick that it was no longer blasting it up in the air, and the amount that was coming out from under the crust had decreased enough. So there may have been some increase beyond day 40, but probably not a whole lot. So the fountains of the great deep are closed. It stopped raining. The windows of heaven. If the windows of heaven is referring to a canopy, that canopy would have been destroyed instantly. If it's just referring to like when they looked out, it looked like the windows of heaven had been thrust open, well, it stopped raining at day 40. So all these things, regardless of what you make of them, two items or three, all of them are done. Now you can imagine at this point, the earth's crust is highly unstable. Equally, the erosion of the pre-flood mountains, the subterranean water chambers, the fountains of great deep, sediment is all over the place. and that sediment is still settling out and being mixed in by tidal effects. I mean, this would have been a global catastrophe that's still playing out at day 150. And then verse 3b, at the end of the 150 days, the waters were abated. Now, initially, this statement seems a little hard to place, and let me show you why. Because we're told during these 150 days that the waters were mighty, they were gabar. We're told that sometime after this, but before here, they were decreasing so that they were decreased enough for the ark to run aground on the mountains of Ararat at day 150. Then we're given this odd statement at the end of 140 days, the waters were completely abated. They were decreased. They were abated. What I think the author is telling us is there were 7 days of final preparation. There were 150 days of water prevailing. There were then 150 days of water decreasing. And then there are 70 final days of the earth drying out. And so that's what that second 150 days is in verse 3b. That's the waters abating after the ark landed. It's not likely that it's the same 150 days because the waters can't be prevailing and abating all at the same time. They can't be decreased. It just, the words don't work out. But again, we're told, if this is what it means by the second 150 days, that this occurred in the 600 year, the 12th month, the 17th day, as we extrapolate the day. Because again, the numbers in red are extrapolation from the numbers we're given. The numbers in black are directly from the Bible. Picking back up in verse 4. And in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Now this statement is very clear. In the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Again, that's the same 150 days that we've been talking about. The waters were gabar over this entire time. So the waters were rising in this 40-day period. They lifted the ark somewhere early, and then sometime after that 40-day period, maybe even starting that 40-day period, they started to decrease, although they were still mighty over the planet. And then in the 600 year, the 7th month, the 17th day of Noah's life, 150 days of water prevailing, the ark came to rest in the mountains of Ararat. Now, if we use a 30-day calendar, we see the 150 lines up perfectly. It makes all the sense in the world. The waters were mighty for 150 days. During most of that period, they were decreasing, although early on they were increasing, and that's when they covered the mountains. Again, the ark drafts 25.5 feet, we'll say. And so even when it came to rest in the mountains of Ararat, there was still 25 foot of water over that spot. So there's a lot more water that has to go down. And if you go back and look at it, although they run aground on the 150th day, they're not going to leave the ark until day 370. That's 220 days later. They're going to be on the ark a very long time. Now, as you think about this, as you think about the 150 days, them be out on the open ocean, first being slammed by the catastrophe that is the fountains of the great deep being broken up, and now just drifting for 110 days aimlessly on an open sea, you have to wonder what they wondered. Is this the new normal? I mean, is this what's going to happen? We don't know what God told them. We know Noah trusted God. We know it believed God. But you had to wonder what they wondered. Back to verse 4, the ark came to rest in the mountains of Ararat. So here's a picture of Ararat. That's Mount Ararat. That's Little Ararat there next door. There's actually a lot of mountains in this area, although Mount Ararat is the highest peak in Turkey at about 17,000 feet. Now, it's important, the ark could have landed on one of these smaller mountains. Equally, it could be a totally different mountain range altogether. We could have lost the true Mount Ararat over time. It's important to note that the peak, the summit of Mount Ararat is snow-covered all year long. But back to what we were saying, notice that the ark rested. It brings with it the idea that the ark had been laboring for 150 days to accomplish the work of saving the occupants from God's temporal judgment, and having done that, it comes to rest. Now, as you think about that word, it should flash back to Genesis 1, and on the 7th day, God finished the work that he had done, and he rested on the 7th day from all the work that he had done. God finished the work of creation and he rested. Here the ark finished the work of deliverance from God's temporal judgment, and it rested in the mountains of Ararat. 2,000 years ago, the Lord Jesus went to Calvary, gave his life's blood, gave his life for our sins, cried out to Telestai, "It is finished," bowed his head, and gave up his spirit. They took him down from the cross, and his body rested in the tomb for 3 days. One more point worth noting, and I made this point, I just want you to hear it again, because it's been definitely a point of confusion for many commentators. The waters prevailed for 150 days. They were mighty. They were Gabar. They did not rise for 150 days. They likely rose for only 40 to, let's say, 60 days at the very tops, probably. But again, it will be another 220 days from the time the ark runs aground till Noah and his family finally leaves the ark. Verse 5. And the waters continued to abate until the 10th month. So that really now makes sense to that second 150 period where they were totally abated. So now we're told the waters continued to abate until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. So if we go back to our diagram, it ran aground here, but it would be another 74 days. It would be day 223 before even the tops of other mountains would be seen. So it wasn't near the top of the tallest mountain around it, for sure, to run aground, and no other things are visible yet for 74 more days. And then the tops of some other mountains begin to be seen. Now, as you think about this, we can imagine the continents now are in much different places. Everything is still settling. These massive ocean basins are still settling. The new mountain ranges are still settling. The earth is very unstable due to all the recent catastrophic plate tectonics and all the volcanism. All of the continents were crushed and uplifted. Water is rushed off the top. I mean, this is a massive, massive event. And the earth is still settling until the waters were dried up from the earth. Sorry about that. I kept on teaching beyond verse 5, and I realized we had stopped at going into verse 6. And so I'm going to go ahead and wrap the recording up. God bless you. I look forward to seeing everyone back in class Sunday as we'll pick back up here as the ark is now landed. The water levels are continuing to decrease, and we'll see all that plays out. God bless.